Hello, this is Alexander McGurk, student number D00140317. In the games development course. This particular project is for the games programming module CA2, tutor John Lone. For CA2 we were asked to make a text-based adventure game and I chose a text-based version of Cluedo. So what I'm going to do now is play through the game, show how the game works, then go behind the scenes and show you the code of it, then talk a bit about error control and some extras. Okay, so this game starts with a somewhat lengthy introduction of what's happening in the game. What's happened is Mr. Black, a very wealthy businessman, has been thrown a small party of wealthy upcoming people and has been murdered in the night. So you play Detective Gray, who has been called in to figure out who has killed him and how and where. So you start off the game in the cellar. The cellar is like the main hub of this game, and a little bit of information about it and what it can do here. In here you can choose to talk to the suspects to get a bit of information on what the characters are like and who they are. You can go investigate where the body was found. You can decide to investigate the body is to see if there's any clues or hints as to who murdered him. You can go around the house and check the individual rooms to see if any of them seem put out of place, to hint that that was where the attack was led. And you can investigate each individual room to find some form of weapon as well. And then you can make a deduction which will bring you to the end game on who you think murdered the victim, with what weapon and where. And it's noted here as well that it's advisable to leave the deduction until you've gone everywhere else, because there's no way going back. And so first we'll look at the suspects. If you go to look at the suspects, you're given a little bit of detail on what happens when you go in to see the suspects, and you get to choose which character by colour or a back option to return. So say for example if we choose red, she's the first, you get a bit of information on who has come up to you, Miss Scarlet, what her appearance looks like. Then you're told you can choose a question to ask the suspect, either who they are or how they know the victim or why they're there, or you can go back to the previous option of choosing which person you want to interrogate. So if we ask who, get a bit of information of her, revealing who she is, and then how would be how they know the victim and why she is there tonight, her reason for being invited. And then you can go back and again choose the ones as well. They all have the same three questions to give an idea of which individual character they're, who and how and such. There's no helping factor towards figuring out who murdered the victim. Using these are purely just to give background information on the possible suspects. So if we return now the cellar here, if we go to the next room, which is body, this brings you into the room where the police found the body. The body's been taken off the corners now, so you can't investigate it, but you can still look around the room to see if there's any evidence left around. So if you choose investigate, a random generator which is activated at the beginning of the game, which chooses which suspect, which weapon and which room will be the chosen ones for this game, will pass in whichever value it is to give you the information on who has done it. So we can see here, upon close inspection of the room, we found a small damaged pocket watch, and in the inside that, let us say PP, which means it belongs to Professor Plum. So you now know that Professor Plum was the suspect, the murderer in this case. It also states that this alone isn't enough evidence, and you still have to find the room he was attacked in and the murder weapon. So they tell them they still have to go back and find the other two pieces of information. If you try to investigate again, you'll get the same information because the character hasn't changed. So we go back. Oh no. Sorry, it was a bit of an input error there. When we go back to the original place again, then we have the house. In here you can choose each individual room. So, or you can choose the cellar to go back to the hub. So we have the ballroom. You get a bit of information about the room and a piece at the end denoting whether or not it's the murder room or not. And inside each individual room you can choose investigate to look around and see if you can find anything that would be used as a murder weapon or not. In this case, not. So the object of the game would be to make the user go through each individual room until they find the correct weapon and room. So the study has been chosen as the murder room here, and I have a feeling that if we go into the lounge and investigate, we'll find murder room and weapon. No, we'll still be another room anyway. Anyway, after they've done all of this, they can return to the cellar. And once you have the body information and the suspects, and the house information, you can choose deduct. So here you're given 3 options which are set to 3 different player inputs. The first one, choose which weapon. Let's choose 4. And the second one, you can choose where you think he was murdered. We found out that was number 9. And who did it, we found out that was number 6. Now if any of the 3 inputs are wrong, you'll get an oh no, you've lost basically answer. And if all 3 are right, you will get a correct answer. Either of which end the game for you. So that's the end of the game. Now we'll look at the code behind all this. Each file has its own header, which are basically just used to call said file in other files and to store the different types of functions and such that will be used in each room. I think load rooms is the only one that has to call in another header itself. Yep. Okay, so we'll go through each individual room here. The body room, as you can see here, is main. Sorry, this room is used to display all the information in, to display the options for the body room itself, for where the victim's body was found. It has a bit of information on the room itself, and then it takes in a user input and checks them against these. If the user puts in investigate, it brings in suspect from from the outside source, or back, it brings it back. I also have this in here, a little piece of code, a little for loop to push whatever the user's input is into all uppercase letters. And there's also error checking for used in an else loop, so if there's any errors it'll just loop back over. In house, the house file sorry about that. In the house file, this reads out the text of which room they can choose. This was the menu for different house rooms, and it lets them take in it takes in an input to be used elsewhere to bring in the information of those rooms. Input is where most of the majority of stuff happens. Input is set up as one large loop that runs off of the information put in through an integer ID and a string input, which I've referenced here. Basically, this checks to see what ID has been set to. If it has been set to 0, that means that they're in the cellar, and so this would be being called to choose which room they have here, and each individual room would simply change it to 1 or 2 or whichever the value for that room. Then, and error control as well. So then after that, if go back to the start here, if 0 is if the ID is anything greater than 0, then this menu has been chosen to give the different menu that would be in each individual room, because if this is set to anything higher than 0, it means it's in one of the rooms at the moment, so that you get the investigate and back options for each room. And then which of those actually do back will change the input to house, meaning you'll go back to the house menu that we just saw, and another for loop to cast the information to uppercase. Here we fill house input with the house text, so that can run off itself if the house input has been changed to study, change the ID number and such. If the input has been changed to body, this is from the cellar now. If the user input has put in body, then it brings you to the body text and passes in suspect and does that externally. And the same happens for suspects. If they choose suspects, it goes to the suspect text to bring up that information. Final piece, as I can go, is the deduction, which will end the game. This passes in the 3 generated functions from the main and has error control as well. It initializes 3 player options at -1, so they couldn't possibly get mixed up. And then each piece of output, there's the menu of which weapon you think was used, and then the next input is pointed to weapon, the same for the room and the suspect. Then these are checked to see if each of the input values are within the possible ranges before even checking them against the correct answers. If they're not, it gives a wrong input and loops back around. If they are, then it checks them against the generated ones. It checks what the user input value is compared to that. If they're correct, you get the winning information, and if it's wrong, you get the losing information. And then as well, inside this loop, ID is changed to 13. 13 is just chosen as a number that is enough out of range of anything else that it can't get mixed up. This will be used in the main to close the game. And there's error control and such, and if the ID here is not 0, this runs off of what happens, sorry, up here. This is if the ID is greater than 0, it gives out that menu, and this is what happens if you choose from that menu. If you choose investigate, it calls in rooms and passes in whatever the ID value is to get that weapon text, and if it's a back, it's set to -1 so that it can reset and do the menu again. Also, there's some final error control and the returning of ID to continuously loop it. Load rooms is basically just a vector which is used to hold it's used to hold all the information of each individual room. There's 4 different room functions. It's called from room itself, and there's 4 different room text pieces, which are the normal room information, the alternate room information if that is the murder room, the weapon information for that room when you choose investigate, and the alternate weapon room information if that weapon is chosen as the murder weapon. That's all that function seems to hold. Sorry, that's all that function does hold. In the next one, I'm going to have to do a second video because I'm running out of time, but in the next one I'll talk about the load suspect room.